In 2014, a bankrupt, dying sci-fi game was bought out by a Chinese chicken processing company. Today, that same game has more than 2 million active users and is heralded as one of the most dynamic and adaptive live service titles of all time. This is a story of Warframe, the most successful hot mess in gaming history. Hey everyone, it's Spopes. If the game is so buggy, players commonly refer to it as Bugframe, how does Warframe still have over 150,000 concurrent users after 13 years? To begin answering that question, we need to turn the clock back all the way to the year 2000, when Digital Extremes, the creators of Warframe, began collaborating with Epic Games to make the best space opera game that never was. It's easy to forget after all this time, but Digital Extremes began its career as a collaborator with Epic Games. Beginning with Unreal in 1998, Digital Extremes and Epic Games went on to create Unreal Tournament, which is to this day considered one of the best games ever made. Coasting off the success of Unreal Tournament, Digital Extremes began working on a new project, codenamed Dark Sector, that was intended to be a grand, sweeping space opera, unprecedented at its time. Beginning in development in 2000, Digital Extremes began shopping around for publishers to pick up Dark Sector around 2005, but faced rejection wherever they went. Publishers routinely told the studio that sci-fi was dead as a genre, and that the only way Dark Sector could work is if the studio completely gutted their original idea for the game, and essentially made it into a Mass Effect clone. So, for the first and only time in the studio's history, Digital Extremes backed down on their vision, completely gutted Dark Sector, and made it into a grittier space shooter game. Dark Sector officially released in 2008, but it wasn't liked by either gamers or game reviewers, putting the studio in a very difficult position. By 2012, Digital Extremes was on the verge of bankruptcy, and without any other options, decided to bet everything on a Hail Mary move that would end up becoming the saving grace of the studio. Utterly bypassing their earlier game publisher conundrum, Digital Extremes decided to release their new title, Warframe, completely independently. Utilizing unused assets from the original Dark Sector game, Digital Extremes put together a closed alpha of Warframe in just 6 months. This original form of Warframe had no story, no real progression, and no tutorial. Early players fell in love, however, with Warframe's incredible movement and combat system. Nothing like this had ever been done before, and this initial enthusiasm encouraged Digital Extremes to go ahead with the project. The initial development of Warframe has gone down in gaming history as one of the craziest developer crunches of all time. Facing bankruptcy, Digital Extremes only had a skeleton crew to put the game together. The remaining developers were pushed to their absolute limits, working essentially constantly to get the game off the ground. What made the situation even more challenging is that in forgoing a traditional game publisher arrangement, Digital Extremes decided to release Warframe as a free-to-play title. At this time, Western gamers had quite a stigma against free-to-play games. This is before the days of Fortnite and Apex Legends, and free-to-play games were largely viewed as pay-to-win or as trashy mobile knockoffs. To counteract this stigma, Digital Extremes knew they had to immediately institute a philosophy of radical fairness. To this day in Warframe, nearly everything in the game can be earned with a premium currency called Platinum, which Digital Extremes decided from the beginning should be tradable between players. Even with this fair and ethical design philosophy in place, Warframe would not overcome the free-to-play stigma overnight. When Warframe officially released in 2013, it was savagely attacked by game journalists and critics. GameSpot famously gave it a 5 out of 10 score, and the game was commonly called pay-to-win, mainly due to crafting timers that you could skip by using Platinum. Initial reviewers completely overlooked that Platinum could be freely traded among players. You could earn valuable items through gameplay and sell them for Platinum, completely overturning this pay-to-win argument. The game was also called unfinished, and the overall synthesis among reviewers was that Warframe was an unpolished, repetitive cash grab. This didn't much perturb existing Warframe players, but it did strongly affect the game's growth trajectory. Even in these early days, Warframe had a dedicated core of players who had made the game their home not so much for the game itself, but because of the developers. In addition to their radical fairness philosophy, Digital Extremes had already made themselves known for working hand-in-hand with players to immediately fix problems with the game. From that point onward, players of Warframe have been treated as co-developers, who are actually listened to, and whose feedback and advice is acted on almost immediately. But aside from this core base, Warframe struggled to grow, and the game desperately needed to grow if Digital Extremes was to attain financial solvency. The beginning of the salvation of Warframe began later in 2013, when the title was released on Steam. Prior to this point, you could only play Warframe by downloading the dedicated launcher on the Warframe website. Potential users who would have done so instead went to gaming review sites, saw their low scores of Warframe, and decided against it. The Steam recommendation algorithm didn't care about reviews from gaming journalists, though. It operated entirely based on user satisfaction metrics. And because Warframe had excellent core gameplay, people who tried it were actually quite satisfied, allowing Warframe to rise the ranks of Steam recommendations and reach 20,000 concurrent players on Steam almost instantly. Warframe's metrics on Steam have only risen past that point, making it one of the most successful free-to-play titles on Steam. But it would turn out that a secret agreement between Sony and Digital Extremes would truly cement the game's long-term success. When the PS4 launched in late 2013, there was a notable content vacuum in the PlayStation Store. PS4 owners had just shelled out $400 for a new console, and they didn't want to immediately turn around and spend more on premium titles. So before the PS4 even launched, Sony's Vice President of Publisher and Developer Relations, Adam Boyes, reached out to Digital Extremes and set up an exclusive deal to have Warframe available on the PS4 when it launched. Digital Extremes only had a few months and a team of 15 developers to port the game to PS4. They somehow managed to do so, making Warframe playable at 60 FPS upon the launch of the new PlayStation. What famously propped up Warframe's initial player base on PlayStation was the incredibly surprising decision to make the game playable without PlayStation Plus. Previously and ever since, PlayStation titles generally require PlayStation Plus if they're free to play and have multiplayer features. But you could play Warframe without PlayStation Plus, and you even got a valuable starter pack if you did have PlayStation Plus and picked up the game. So by this point, despite being bare bones and essentially unfinished, Warframe was running on all cylinders on Steam and PS4. This attracted the attention of a very unlikely financial backer. The Chinese chicken processing corporation, Sumpo Food Holdings, somehow caught wind of Warframe and bought a controlling stake in Digital Extremes. The previously bankrupt studio was now valued at $120 million, and being bought out by Sumpo, later renamed Leiyu, gave Digital Extremes the breathing room it needed to continue developing Warframe. Between 2013 and 2015, Warframe transformed from the gutted successor to Unreal Tournament to a free-to-play dark horse, breaking records in the genre on both Steam and PS4. Digital Extremes had made a name for itself by listening to players, overcoming the odds, working incredibly hard, and directly appealing to its player base, not journalists or game publishers. They had built an incredibly dedicated community based on open communication. But how did Digital Extremes solidify the gains of Warframe over the next few years? Even though it was popular, successful, and now financially viable, Warframe still suffered from a core defect. It essentially had no story. But that would change forever in 2015. This successfully pivoted Warframe from a run-of-the-mill free-to-play looter shooter to the sweeping cinematic space opera epic that Digital Extremes had always intended Warframe to be. It was with the second dream that Warframes themselves changed from empty mechanical suits of armor to lore-rich psychic drones controlled remotely by a teenage operator. It was at this point that Digital Extremes began building an emotionally resonant narrative universe around Warframe, using high-quality cinematics and plotlines. The following year, Digital Extremes firmly cemented their community-focused identity with the first ever Tennocon. This in-person convention of Warframe players, which has occurred every year since, except during the pandemic, has become a yearly highlight for Warframe players, featuring both opportunities to socialize with other players and keynote presentations revealing what's coming next for the game. Every year at Tennocon, Digital Extremes doubles down on their focus on the players, making them feel heard and represented, giving them opportunities to connect not only with other players but with the developers themselves. It was around this time that Digital Extremes also started laying the groundwork for the full cross-save and cross-play ecosystem that is now available in Warframe. When the game released on the Nintendo Switch in 2018, Digital Extremes gave Warframe players the one-time opportunity to transfer a PC account to console. This evolved into the implementation of full cross-play and cross-save in 2023, navigating one of the most difficult hurdles for any live service game, and unifying the Warframe ecosystem around one central server infrastructure, one central community hub. These days, Warframe is fully cross-play and cross-save, and it's even available on mobile, which we'll get to shortly. But before we keep covering the positive, it's time to talk about the most significant crisis Warframe had faced since launch. One thing Digital Extremes has never lacked is ambition, but that ambition almost became the studio's undoing. Between 2017 and 2023, an incredible variety of content was added to Warframe. The only issue was that none of it connected. In 2017, 2018, and 2020, 3 new open-world free roam areas were added to Warframe: the Plains of Eidolon, Orb Valis, and Cambion Drift. While they featured compelling narratives and excellent exploration, nothing you did there really applied to the rest of the game. As a result, these new forms of content were referred to as content islands. You could go enjoy them, sure, but they didn't add anything to the core gameplay loop of Warframe. This only got worse with the addition of the railjack, a giant combat spaceship, and later on the Deviri paradox, a roguelite game mode that had essentially nothing to do with the rest of the game. The new war questline and the addition of the Drifter were great in many ways, but they only exacerbated this content island issue. As usual with the studio, however, Digital Extremes responded in style. The original game director left Warframe to work on the studio's new title, Soulframe, and was replaced by Rebecca Ford, who had been the community director since the game's launch. As someone who is highly focused on the community and their pain points, Rebecca Ford instituted a whole new direction for Warframe, focusing on integrating the content islands into one cohesive ecosystem. She led a push to integrate all the new content into the main narrative framework of the game. She made resources and rewards from content islands universally useful. She doubled down on the core combat of Warframe and its movement system, and led the team in integrating more and more quality of life improvements. It's really under Rebecca Ford's leadership that Warframe has entered its golden era. The game has had many ups and downs since its launch, but now it can be said that Warframe is truly in its best state ever, mainly due to this shift in leadership. But that's not the only factor that has contributed to Warframe's recent success. Between 2024 and 2026, Warframe has released on mobile platforms, starting with iOS in 2024, and then just recently in early 2026 on Android. This means that Warframe players on PC, on PlayStation, on Xbox, and Nintendo Switch have been joined by a huge rush of new adopters on mobile platforms. Plus, due to the implementation of full cross-save, players on PC can also play on mobile if they want to. Same goes for console players. And the mobile version of Warframe is an exact replica of the normal game. Nothing is missing or watered down. You can play the entire game of Warframe on mobile, which is a massive achievement for a game of this size and complexity. Releasing on mobile led to an immediate and seemingly lasting bolstering of player numbers. And it's also been great optics for Digital Extremes. They've proven again they can do the seemingly undoable through a combination of sheer effort and respect of the community. But Warframe isn't done evolving. At Tennocon in 2026, the developers revealed that an entire new star system was being added to Warframe. It's been in the lore for a long time, but never in the game. Later this year, players will be going to Tau, where the androids known as the Sentients were originally sent by the Orokin Empire, and have since freed themselves from their hive mind through what is essentially drug use, and have developed an incredibly complex sci-fi noir culture. This new narrative is taking Warframe in a completely different direction, doubling down on the game's sci-fi noir aesthetic, featuring a new detective-themed Warframe, and diving deep into sentient culture and Tau. There's even a new card game being added to Warframe, and with this upcoming DLC, the lore of the Sentients will be expanded massively. So in the end, why is Warframe, or rather Bugframe, as successful as it is? As I've been playing the game recently, I've been met with countless bugs, mainly to do with matchmaking, where I'll just be stuck in a loading screen, the match will be disbanded before it even begins. Sometimes players and enemies just simply stand around completely static, frozen in place. Why don't Warframe players seem to care about any of this, when they would have eviscerated a different game for the same issues? Well, there are a few reasons. One, the underlying game is actually really good. Digital Extremes nailed the combat and movement system in Warframe from the very beginning. At the beginning of the game, that's basically all there was, but it stayed largely the same over the years, only improving over time. In a nutshell, it just feels really good to play Warframe. The combat and the movement is amazing. You don't feel the need to hate on the game or leave it, because every time you play, you have fun. You also might wonder why players have stuck with just a basic looter shooter all this time. Warframe is not a true MMO. It does not really have open world areas. But again, players don't care. Even without a true seamless open world, there's so much to do in Warframe, so much different content, that it really doesn't get stale. But what's most likely the biggest factor supporting Warframe's long-term success is that Digital Extremes never gave up on their philosophy of radical fairness. They never stopped listening to the community. Whenever there have been controversies about predatory shop items, those items have been removed or changed. Whenever the community has been vocal about bugs or issues of the game, the studio has responded. I really do think that's the core factor behind Warframe's success. It doesn't really matter how many issues there are with the game, if the developers show they actually care about those issues, and they're working to fix them. But from a mechanistic angle, Warframe has just as much been supported by the implementation of crossplay. The fact that you can play the game on PC, on console, and on mobile is just wild. That you can switch from one ecosystem to the other with the same account, playing with the same people. To my knowledge, no game of this size or complexity has ever done anything like this, truly setting Warframe apart from the competition and causing its accessibility stats to skyrocket. Plus, with continual graphical improvements and optimization for new systems, Warframe simply doesn't feel dated. Sure, some of the oldest content can feel kind of old, but despite being free, despite not being a AAA game, The most recent story content feels just as fresh and new as anything else released during this period. Digital Extremes has truly shown you can make an amazing game without charging a penny for it, honestly putting the AAA industry to shame. This has all led to Warframe being incredibly healthy in terms of its monthly and concurrent players. A huge number of people play the game. Not as many as, say, Minecraft or Fortnite, but certainly more than most MMOs. And regardless of how many players actually play the game, Digital Extremes has clearly stated they will stick to their fundamental roots of radical fairness and community-centeredness. Just this year, in an interview, the new community director of Warframe, Megan Everett, had this to say: "We'll keep making this game even if there's one player count." She went on to say, "I don't care what SteamDB says. We're still going to be here, trying our best." That's the story of Warframe, how Digital Extremes overcame initial hurdles to achieve resounding success. In the comments, let us know what you think about this story. What do you think about Warframe? What do you think about the history I just laid out? Is Warframe a true success? Does it have a bright future? Let us know what you think in the comments. And before you go, please support the channel by liking, hyping, and subscribing. You can take your support a step further with a Spokes Army membership by purchasing some of the merch below the video, or by going to my Fourth Wall site for a full catalog. On Fourth Wall, there's also a box for you to leave a donation, and you can donate here on YouTube in the form of super thanks. Thank you so much for watching this video. I'm so grateful to all of you, but I'm even more grateful to God. So I'm going to finish up the video with a prayer to my Lord and Savior, Jesus Christ. Lord Jesus, thank you for making it possible to make this video today. Thank you for Warframe and for everyone watching. Please do bless this video. Please bless Warframe, and please do be with and bless everyone watching this video. Draw them closer to you and grant them divine providence. Lord, I give you all glory for my channel and for this video. Lord, in your mercy, hear our prayer. Thanks so much for watching until the end. Please don't forget to like, hype, comment, and subscribe. And when you do subscribe, turn on notifications, because I'll be back soon with new content.